Picture a wall of granite and ice rising more than 2.5 miles into the sky, so immense that from the valley floor you have to tilt your head all the way back just to find its summit. This is the highest mountain in Western Europe, a peak that gave birth to an entire sport that drew explorers and dreamers for centuries, and that still calls some 20,000 climbers a year to test themselves against its slopes. But here's the secret. You don't need ropes or crampons to stand in its presence. Today, you'll ride one of the most dramatic cable cars on Earth nearly to the roof of the Alps, step into a glass box suspended over 1,000 meters of open air, and walk into a cave carved from the heart of an ancient glacier. This is the White Mountain, Mont Blanc. Welcome to Walking Tour of France, a podcast dedicated to bringing you a new adventure somewhere in France with every episode. Each week, we'll travel to a different destination, from ancient ruins and stunning gardens to fascinating cities, historic landmarks, and hidden gems tucked away across this incredible country. If you're gearing up for your own trip, head over to northstartravelers.com, where you'll find gear recommendations to help you travel smarter, plus a full list of our other podcast shows covering destinations around the world. If you love discovering new places and planning your next adventure, follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leaving a positive review goes a long way in helping others find it. Now let's explore France. You begin in the center of Chamonix, a small town folded into a deep valley in the French Alps, the Arve River threading through its heart and steep wooded slopes climbing on either side. It's early and the air still carries the cool bite of the mountains. Cafes are setting out their chairs, a bakery somewhere is pulling the first croissants from the oven, and climbers in heavy boots are already crossing the square with coils of rope over their shoulders. Look up, past the rooftops and the church spire, and the reason you came is impossible to miss. A chain of jagged rock needles climbs toward the sky, and behind them, higher than all the rest, sits a vast rounded dome of brilliant white. That dome is the summit you've heard about your whole life. The highest point in the Alps and in all of Western Europe, standing 4,807 meters above the sea. Locals simply call it the White Mountain, and once you've seen it glowing in the morning light, the name needs no explanation. Take a moment here in the square before you go higher, because this town and this mountain are bound together in a way that changed history. For most of human existence, this peak was not something people admired, it was something they feared. The villagers who scratched a living from these slopes, growing rye and oats and herding cattle through long, brutal winters, called the heights above them cursed. The glaciers that crept down into the valley were thought to be alive, even malevolent, swallowing pasture and homes as they advanced. No one in their right mind climbed toward that ice on purpose. That began to change in 1741, when two young Englishmen wandered up into the valley out of sheer curiosity and stumbled upon a river of ice so vast it stopped them cold. They named it the Sea of Ice, wrote about it when they returned home, and almost overnight this remote valley became a place that the curious and the adventurous of Europe simply had to see. A few decades later, a scientist from Geneva named Horace Benedict de Saussure arrived, gazed up at the Great Dome, and became obsessed with reaching the top. In 1760, he did something that would echo for centuries. He offered a cash reward to the first person who could find a route to the summit. For 26 years, no one claimed it. The mountain defended itself with crevasses, avalanches, thin air, and weather that could turn deadly in minutes. Then, on the 8th of August in 1786, two local men, a crystal hunter and a village doctor, pushed through the final slopes and stood at last on the highest point in the Alps. That single ascent is remembered today as the birth of modern mountaineering, the moment a fearsome peak became a summit to be earned. A year later, de Saussure himself made the climb, and in 1808 a local servant woman became the first woman to reach the top, climbing in a long skirt and helping to prove that these heights belonged to anyone bold enough to try. The town transformed around that achievement. Farmers became guides and innkeepers. In 1821, the local men who knew these slopes best formed a company of mountain guides that still exists today, more than 2 centuries later. Grand hotels rose along the streets, their ornate facades stacked one architectural era atop another, and as you walk through town, you can still read the story of its growth simply by looking up at the buildings. By 1924, the place had become so synonymous with the mountains that it hosted the very first Winter Olympic Games. You're standing in the cradle of alpine adventure, and now it's your turn to go up. Leave the square and make your way through the streets toward the southern edge of town, where a cable station sits at the foot of the slopes. This is the departure point for the most famous cable car ride in the Alps, the one that will carry you toward a rock spire called the Aiguille du Midi, the Needle of the Noon, a slender granite tower that stands directly across from the great summit. Step into the cabin, feel the doors close, and brace yourself, because what happens next is unlike any cable car you've ever ridden. The cabin lifts off and the town drops away beneath your feet with startling speed. Pine forest rushes past, then thins, then disappears entirely as you rise above the tree line. In just a few minutes, you reach a midway station perched on a shoulder of the mountain at over 2,300 meters, a place where summer hikers step off to wander the high meadows. But you're going higher, you change cabins, and now comes the part that takes people's breath away. The second cable stretches up the sheer north face of the needle in a single, impossibly steep span. No support pillars anywhere along the way, just a thin line climbing into the rock and ice above. The cabin seems to hang in the void, gliding upward over glaciers and cliffs until it slips into the very top of the spire. You step out at 3,842 meters, and the world has completely changed. The air is thin and sharp and cold, even in midsummer. Tunnels carved through the rock connect a series of terraces and viewing platforms clinging to the pinnacle. Take the small elevator that climbs through the heart of the spire to the highest terrace of all, and when the doors open and you step outside, there it is, the summit, so close now that it feels you could reach out and touch it. From here, the great white dome fills the sky. It slopes a blinding field of snow and ice. Turn slowly, and you can see the peaks of 3 countries at once, France and Italy and Switzerland, a sea of summits stretching to the horizon, with the distant pyramid of the Matterhorn rising far to the northeast. Down below, on a saddle of snow, you may spot a thin line of tiny figures roped together, moving slowly across the white. Those are mountaineers setting off on one of the classic routes to the top, and watching them gives you a sense of just how high you've come, and how much higher the true summit still rises. This very spot is where many of them begin, stepping out through a tunnel in the ice and onto the open glacier with axes and crampons. When you're ready for a jolt of pure adrenaline, follow the signs to the attraction that made this place famous around the world, a glass box that projects out from the terrace into thin air. They call it the step into the void. You'll be asked to slip on soft overshoes to protect the floor, and then you walk forward onto 5 panels of glass, walls, ceiling, and floor all transparent, with more than 1,000 meters of empty space falling away directly beneath your feet. Your eyes tell you that you're standing on nothing at all, suspended above the glaciers far below. Your stomach may protest, but the structure is engineered to withstand winds of over 200 kilometers an hour and wild swings of temperature. Take the step, look down, feel your heart hammer. It's a sensation you won't forget. When your legs steady again, there's more to explore up here. A steel gallery tunnels out along the spire to give you another dizzying perspective, and a small museum devoted to the history of mountaineering, the highest of its kind anywhere, tells the story of the men and women who climbed these slopes when there were no cable cars to help them. Here's a piece of advice worth remembering. Take the very first cable car of the morning if you possibly can. The light is at its clearest, the crowds haven't yet arrived, and on a busy summer afternoon, the queue for that little summit elevator can stretch on, and dress far warmer than the valley weather suggests. It can be 20 or 30 degrees colder up here with a wind that cuts right through you, even when Chamonix is basking in sunshine far below. Stand at the railing for one more long look. Let your eyes follow the curve of the summit, the way the snow catches the light, the silence broken only by wind and the distant crack of shifting ice. Then make your way back to the cable car and begin the long descent, the valley floor rushing up to meet you, the town slowly resolving into streets and rooftops again as you drop back into the world of ordinary air. Back in town, you have one more journey to make, and it leads in a different direction entirely, not up toward the summit this time, but to the foot of the great glacier you heard about earlier, the Sea of Ice. Walk to the eastern side of the main railway station, where a separate little terminal waits, and there you'll find one of the most beloved sights in the whole valley, a small, bright red cog railway train that has been climbing this mountainside since 1908. Find a seat, and if you can, choose the left-hand side because that's where the valley views open up as you climb. The train sets off with a gentle lurch, its toothed wheels gripping a rack rail laid up the impossibly steep slope. For 20 minutes, it chugs upward through forest and short tunnels, climbing nearly 900 meters, the windows sliding open to let in the cool, resin-scented air. Then the trees fall away, and you arrive at a rocky perch high on the mountainside, where you step off onto a broad terrace and the view stops you in your tracks. Across the valley rise some of the most dramatic spires in the entire range, the unmistakable twin peaks of the Druce, and beyond them the long fortress wall of the Grand Jurasse. And below you, filling the valley between these granite giants, lies the glacier itself, a frozen river spilling down from the high peaks. Take your time on this terrace because what you're looking at tells two stories at once. The first is one of wonder. This is the largest glacier in France, 7 kilometers long and in places 200 meters deep, an ancient mass of ice fed by streams of frozen snow from the highest summits. For more than 2 centuries, it has drawn travelers, artists, and writers. It even appears in the pages of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where the desolate ice becomes a stage for one of literature's most haunting encounters. The second story is harder to look at. Up until about 1820, this glacier reached so far down the valley that it could be seen from the town itself. Today, it has retreated far up the mountainside, and as you make your way down toward the ice, you'll pass markers showing where its surface stood in years past, here in 1990, here in 2000, here in 2010. Each one a little higher than the last, a quiet, sobering record of how quickly the ice is vanishing. From the terrace, board the gondola that drops you down toward the glacier's surface. At the bottom, there's a descent of several hundred steps along metal walkways, a climb that you'll feel on the way back up, and a measure in itself of how far the ice has shrunk. But it's worth every step because at the end of it, you reach something extraordinary. A cave carved directly into the living glacier. Every single year, workers cut a fresh tunnel by hand into the ice, sculpting chambers and corridors that glow with a deep, otherworldly blue. Inside, the temperature hovers right around freezing, even on the warmest summer day, and the walls press in around you, smooth and ancient and faintly luminous. You are standing inside a glacier that has been flowing down this mountain for thousands of years. Run your hand near the wall, feel the cold radiating off it, and let yourself absorb the strangeness of the moment. Back at the top, before you head down, step into the small glacier museum near the station. It's a thoughtful, interactive space that explains how these rivers of ice form, how they move, and how the warming climate is reshaping them, with a striking 3-dimensional model of the whole massif that helps everything you've seen today fall into place. On a quiet morning, you might even find a glaciologist on hand to answer questions. And here's a tip most rushing visitors miss. Don't make this a hurried in-and-out trip. Walk a little way along the marked trail from the station for an even finer vantage over the ice, and give yourself the gift of simply sitting for a while with one of the great natural wonders of the Alps. As you wait for the little red train to carry you back down, take one last look out over the frozen valley. Think about everything this place has shown you in a single day, a summit that terrified people for centuries and then inspired them to invent a whole new way of testing the human spirit, a glass box that let you hang in the sky over 1,000 meters of nothing, a cave of blue ice that exists only because someone carves it anew each year, and that may not exist forever. The White Mountain has stood over this valley for longer than we can comprehend, indifferent to us, magnificent and unmoved. And yet, for a few hours today, you got to stand in its presence, breathe its thin, cold air, and feel, in the best possible way, very small. That feeling of awe, of fragility, of wonder at a world far older and larger than ourselves is the real summit of this journey. Carry it back down with you into the valley. When you're back in town and ready to eat, you'll find that this valley takes its mountain cooking seriously, and a few favorites are worth seeking out. Le Monchou, just off the main pedestrian streets, is a warm, rustic spot famous for its cheese fondue, raclette, and beef seared on a hot stone right at your table. La Table, near the cable car base, serves generous, hearty alpine cooking. Think fondue, tartiflette, and a French onion soup people rave about. For an intimate, modern take on the local cheeses, Malabar Princess is a cozy little wine and cheese bar a few minutes from the center, known for award-winning fondue. Le Fer à Cheval, on a quiet square, pairs refined French cooking with its own small brewery. And if you just want a perfect croissant or a slice of pastry to fuel your morning ascent, Pastry House Richard on the main street has been drawing happy queues for years. If you have more time in the valley, there's plenty more to discover. Just across the valley from the Great Summit, The cable car up to Le Brevant carries you to a balcony with arguably the finest head-on view of the White Mountain there is, perfect for sunset. Higher and wilder, the Aiguille Rouge Nature Reserve offers classic alpine hikes, with the jewel-like Lac Blanc reflecting the peaks on a clear day. At the quieter end of the valley, the village of Les Houches is the starting point for a charming mountain tramway that climbs toward the high slopes. Closer to town, the Bossons Glacier tumbles down almost to the valley floor in one of the steepest ice falls in the Alps. And right in the heart of town, the Alpine Museum tells the human story of these mountains, the guides, the climbers, and the golden age of exploration that began here. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Before you go, a few quick things. Subscribe so you never miss a destination, leave us a positive review to help others find the show, and share this episode with someone who loves exploring France. And if you're hungry for more adventures beyond France, visit northstartravelers.com to explore our other podcast shows and browse gear recommendations for wherever your next journey takes you. Your support means the world and keeps these adventures coming. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next walk.